So I'm here from Cognitives today to talk to you about basically how some of the big brands out there are leading with content, some of the success factors that are coming in here, and how technology is facilitating that for these brands, and then how you can leverage it and how you can use it yourselves in your own businesses. Really interesting to hear today how many people are talking about content as a critical factor in digital marketing. So it's quite an interesting spiel. I thought I might have been one of the only ones today, but no, it's a leading topic for us. Okay, before we get into talking about the brands themselves, let's talk a little bit further about the marketing landscape and the changes that we've seen come in over the past few years. So the thing that we need to keep in mind when we're doing any kind of marketing at the moment, digital or otherwise, is that the landscape has changed dramatically. One of the best examples I've got of this that I've heard is from Pepsi. So he's talking about how for a brand like Pepsi, it used to be fairly simplistic when you were doing marketing. You were looking at 4 core pieces of content a year. We're really talking TV commercials for this particular brand. And you'd have the luxury of 6 to 8 months to create that commercial and about $1 million per commercial to do so. The changes that we've seen come about now with the digital landscape, that's now changed to 4,000 pieces of content a year. 8 months has turned into 8 days, 8 hours, and the budgets have stayed the same. So that's the pressure that brands are facing at the moment when they're dealing with content out in the marketplace, is that 4,000 pieces of content a year is what a brand like Pepsi is currently undertaking. The thing that we're seeing in here, I know a few other people have talked about this as well, is the overwhelming amount of content that's now out in the market basically means that it's becoming incredibly difficult to stand out. It's one of the biggest challenges that brands face today out of anything else, whether you're dealing with content blogs, whether you're dealing with social, it really doesn't matter. It's very, very difficult to get your voice out there. And so it's becoming a race, and people see it as a race to produce more content faster, get out there in front of the competition. But it's not actually about the race. It's not about the pace that you're undertaking. It's not about what you're trying to push out there. If we step back and have a bit of a look at it, currently brands are spending approximately 60% of their budget producing content. Now, I'd like to pause here as well, because I know a lot of people here talk about content marketing. It's one of the big buzzwords that are out there at the moment. We don't talk about content marketing. What we need to be focusing on is content in marketing and the content that you produce. It's not about trying to pursue blogs. It's trying to use content in every single channel that you've got. It's not new. It's the TV commercials that you were doing 10 years ago. It's just the medium that's changed, the way that you're distributing that content, and the platforms that you're using to do so. So that's one of the critical factors for us. So while you're producing all of that content, what's interesting online, and this is one of my favourite but also scariest stats that I've seen out there, only 5% of branded content currently online accounts for 95% of all engagement. So if you think about the content that you're producing for your brand or that other brands are producing and pushing out there at as fast a pace as possible, most of it is ineffective. And it's not doing anything, it's not being seen by anyone, and it's not driving engagement. And it's a critical thing to remember when you are looking at the content that you're spreading out across all of those channels. But don't give up. Content is still absolutely fantastic, and it's a really pivotal piece of your marketing mix at the moment. And there are brands out there that are doing really, really well with it. So let's have a bit of a look at some of the brands that are owning it at the moment. So I'm going to dive into some deep dives on some of these clients as well. But here's a bit of an overview of some of the ones that are being really successful at the moment, in particular in the content space. The way that they're being successful, before we get into the nitty-gritty, there are 6 kind of key factors that I see replicated across all of these different brands. The first one is that they are producing enough quality content. Now, there's a few different things going on in there. It's about producing enough, not mass production, and it's about quality, right? So it's about making sure you're creating the right content to feed your audience. The second one is about cohesive teams and everyone being on one page when it comes to your content strategy. There's very little point if you've got 3 people running a different race. So you want to make sure everyone It's also about visibility over the entire process. It is a production process. It goes from start to finish. There's planning, there's workflows, there's all sorts of people involved in that process. If you don't have visibility, you're going to get blockages. You're going to get workflow shortages. And you're going to have inefficiencies, people twiddling their thumbs when they should be producing great content. So making sure that they've got the visibility across the entire end-to-end process. Asset management is another one that we've seen really successfully managed with these particular brands. So it's the ability for everyone in their teams, no matter where they are, so often we're talking decentralised content teams as well, they're able to access the right content assets and apply them at the right time. So there's no waiting for approvals of this particular branded campaign and which images am I using for this. Everything's organised. And it's about distribution, making sure your content is getting out to the right people at the right location. So talking about it earlier, it's great to have the most beautiful piece of content in the world, but if no one's seeing it, what's the point? So it's about making sure that your distribution is out there. And then tracking, likewise. If you're going to be running this entire engine, you need to know what's working, and just as importantly, you need to know what's not working in order to reach success in this. So these are all 6 factors we've seen for the following brands that are doing it really, really well. What they're doing, and what we're going to go through for each of them, is building a content factory. Now that's a bit of a different one for people to try and absorb. Often when you think of content, you're thinking of creativity, you're thinking of the craft, and you're thinking of building something beautiful. That's important. Quality is incredibly important in everything that you create. But if you're going to do something repeatable and you're going to do something well, then there are a lot of aspects of production, manufacturing, that you can take to make your content strategy incredibly successful. So who's rocking it? One of the first ones I want to talk about is Tourism Australia. If you haven't already heard about what they're doing in the content space, they've won a ton of awards in this space. They're doing great things. So a bit of a brief overview of some of the highlights that they're doing at the moment. So they did a big reconfiguration back in 2016, did some partnerships and so forth. The thing that's really interesting about their content strategy is that 50% of their audience is millennial audience. So they're really focusing on being social more than anything else, being interactive, lots of short snippets and engaging content. They're also heavily focused on localization of content as well, making sure that every piece that they're doing feels personalised. One of the things that is most interesting in regards to what Tourism Australia have done with their content is around user-generated content. So if you haven't been to their hashtag #SeeAustralia on Instagram, they have millions of beautiful, beautiful images that have been sourced from their users or from contributors around the world that they are free to license and use without payment. And they use it through all of their social content. In addition to that, they've focused very heavily on making sure their content flows all the way through the sales cycle. They did a massive implementation piece of work in the background to make sure that every piece of content they create is being used from start to finish for the customer as they're coming through the sales funnel. So just to sum it up there, their content factory, if you will, is about large volumes of content. So it's all about the medium when it comes to volume. They're focusing on social, so they need a lot of it. They're distributing it across multiple channels. So if you're dealing with the millennial market, you can't just be on one social platform, you've got to be on all of them. And it's got to be personalised across the entire experience as well. So that's their particular focus. If we jump across to Blue Notes, so talking about banking, finance here, this is ANZ's content hub. They are also one of the leading content publishers, if you will, in Australia. They have a standalone brand publishing site. They've gone down a very different path. They have it under a different brand. It's not even branded as ANZ, it's branded as Blue Notes. And they have a full journalist team running this publication. So a very, very different approach to what Tourism Australia has done. They've got over 500 different authors that are contributing content into this engine. Most of them are from ANZ. So they're using all of their internal knowledge base that aren't in the marketing team. These are people spread all over the world that have intimate knowledge that they're leveraging to push forward into their content play. So very, very different. But they're dealing with much smaller pieces of content. They only publish about 30 pieces a month, but they're in-depth, long-form article content, which is what their particular audience wants to read. So quite a different content factory when we break it down. So we're looking at, say, medium volumes of content. It's all long-form article content. So one of their biggest challenges with 500 contributors around the world is going to be a complex review and approvals process. So that's something that they've had to tackle and solve their end. Another great one here that we love to talk about is the Blue Room from Bupa. So similar to Blue Notes, it's a standalone publishing venture, but it's branded under Bupa rather than Blue Notes, which is missing all the ANZ branding. So quite different there. Their strategic goal is to actually engage people in the Blue Room to understand the different services and products that are available by Bupa. It's not just about pushing them through a siloed sales funnel, it's also about education and cross-sell of services. They're a heavily regulated industry, and this is something that's quite interesting when you start moving into the health sector, and we see it a lot, is the issues with regulation and content. You can't just publish one piece of content in Australia and easily distribute that same piece of content in the States or South Africa. So if you're dealing with a regulated industry, that becomes really interesting in regards to your content approvals. Now, like Blue Notes, they have a lot of external contributors. Most of those are not from Bupa. These are external industry experts that they've gotten on site to contribute content into Bupa. So similar, but quite different at the same time. They also don't produce as much content as Blue Notes does, but they still see the same success rates. So we're dealing here with lower volumes of content, external content contributors, and because of that, decentralised workflows. When you're dealing with a number of people spread across different industries, different branches, different locations, that's the challenge you're having to face. Getting into retail, Lorna Jane. Most of us here are probably familiar with that brand. They've been going gangbusters. Their content hub, again, very, very different. So their content hub is under the Lorna Jane brand. It's in their website, but it's on a standalone domain, which is quite an interesting little metric for them. However, the main thing about their content hub is about core philosophy and alignment with the brand's values. That is what they're pushing for. It's just a light, absorbing type site, focused very tightly on its market audience. They produce a much smaller amount of content as well, about 20 pieces a month. The difference with Lorna Jane is they focus on a lot of mixed medium, whereas with the other content hubs that we've looked at, they focus themselves to one particular medium. With Lorna Jane, they're looking at videos, they're looking at articles, they've got lots of recipes. It's quite an interesting variety that they're offering here. So again, when you look at their content engine, we're dealing with medium volumes of content in regards to the other ones that we're looking at, many different mediums that they're trying to balance, and they have quite a small content team. They manage everything internally. They don't have external contributors, aside from those that they do interviews with. It keeps going. CPA, in the black. This one's more of a member association rather than finance. Now, again, very interesting difference when you compare CPA to something like Blue Notes. We're dealing with someone that has a physical printed magazine still. We don't see those so often anymore, but they're still around and people still focus on them. So it's important for CPA that they are aligning their In the Black publication with the online digital publication that they're also releasing here. Now, similar to Blue Notes, they have an experienced journalism team, but they produce twice the amount of content as Blue Notes does on a monthly basis. What's interesting, and I haven't quite figured out the why of it yet, is that they publish half of their content every month on the first of the month. So they front load a large amount of content and then it flows out through the month as well. It's just a bit of an interesting nugget, that one. So with CPA, they're dealing with high volumes of content, again a decentralised content team, and the need to align themselves to a print edition. Now, the main reason that I've gone through all of those, hopefully you found some of the information interesting and valuable for your particular industry as well, they are all so different. They're producing content, but they're doing it with different sized teams. Some are using internal contributors, some are using external. They're all producing very different amounts of content. So what is it that makes them all successful? It's that factory mentality. They've worked out those 6 challenges and they've managed to make it work. They've managed to get a process, they've managed to make it repeatable. Now, when it comes to factory mentality, don't think it means cheap. There are amazing high-quality brands out there. Think of some of them firsthand. We've got Rolex, you've got Tesla, you've got Louis Vuitton. We've got amazing different brands that are using factories to produce amazing quality content and products. So what I like to do is I like to think of content as a product. Just like your brand has products, you may have services, but you're selling something that you're packaging. Content is the same. You need to think of it with that mentality. You need to think of it in the realms of how can I build a process engine around this? How can I streamline it? How can I take out roadblocks and inefficiencies and produce high quality content to my audience at the right volume to achieve my goals? This is where technology comes in. So every single one of these brands have put specific technologies in place to achieve the specific content engine that they need to build. And as we can see, there's no one size fits all, just put this in place and everything's going to work. It depends on what your content goals are and what your content engine is going to look like. These are the types of things you want to be looking for when you're looking at technology to drive this engine. These are the benefits that you're going to get out of it. Just like manufacturing, and this is where I find the crossover really, really interesting. It's about automation. And it's about making sure that everyone's got visibility and communication across the entire bandwidth. One thing that many people miss, but that is incredibly important, is quality control. Make sure that the steps that you're doing in the content engine that you're running ensures quality is going to be there. Find out about blockages. The last thing you want to have is to completely blow out an entire month's worth of content because you haven't seen the blockages that are coming forward. And accountability and, of course, repeatability. If you can't repeat it, it's not an engine. So, if you're wanting to put together a technology stack to deliver those benefits for you, these are the options you have available. There are roughly 5,000 different marketing products out in market at the moment. And it is awful to look at this list. Where on earth would you start? And this is often where people get, they just stop. It's just too much, right? So the focus that I have when you're looking at technology products to build the engine, the first question that you need to be asking yourselves is it going to create more complexity? And this is where if you step back from thinking of it as a typical creative or like design type process, where it's what can I add to this to just make it better? Also step back and think of it like an engine. What can I add to this to make it more effective, to make it more efficient, require less moving parts to get to my goal? It's like golf. You want to be able to reach all of your objectives with the smallest number of tools, not the largest number of tools. I meet many businesses and their marketing teams brag about the amount of tools that they use to run their marketing team. That's not the goal, right? The goal is for us to be more effective and more efficient in what we're doing. Some of the things to watch out for when you're going and having a look at these tools as well, there's often a lot of unseen costs that come with them. The ones to watch out for and the ones to question tightly are around integrations. If you're going to be plugging a number of tools together, make sure they integrate with each other. Make sure they also integrate with the platforms that you use as a business. There's nothing worse than putting in place marketing tools that don't integrate to your CRM. How on earth are you going to pull that data through into your sales funnel and know what's working? Also focus on upgrades, and training is often a massive one as well. Not just training when you first implement the product, but as you grow your marketing team, as you need other staff coming in there, how are you going to train them? Does it take 3 months? Because that's going to need to be added to the onboarding process for any new staff as well. So all of these things are things to keep in mind. My recommendation is to focus on horizontal platforms. Don't get swayed by the nice, shiny niche platforms that can do this one particular thing better than you've ever seen before. That's great, but again, it's about the smaller number, right? So it's about focusing on getting to the goal, not focusing on what's shiny and what's new. So to sum up, when it comes to technology to drive those content engines that we've been talking about, I've got 5 main recommendations for you. The first one is scale. Just like when you're a child and you're wanting to get shoes, you don't want something that you're going to grow out of in 1 to 3 months. You want something you can grow into and that's going to last with you. It's about scale. Where is your marketing team going to be in 3 years' time? Great, build for that. Make sure it's going to be able to handle the load that you're intending to push through it. Features. Now this goes back to the horizontal one. Think of all the different features that you need. What boxes do you need these platforms to tick? And then try and find the platforms that are going to tick most of your boxes. At the end of the day, if you're missing one little feature, it's unlikely that that's actually going to bug you if it's a minor feature, versus having to use 2 or 3 different platforms and constantly fluff around with integrations. Be realistic about what you're wanting to get out of these tools. Pick something that's easy, please, dear God. When it comes to implementing platforms, I've done a lot of it in the past, and I've worked with some pretty old, hard products to use. And if it's going to take 3 months to learn it and get your team trained on it, it's just going to continually keep hurting you. So do make sure that whatever you're picking is going to be easy to understand and easy to implement as well. So you want to be up and running as quickly as possible. Cloud. I don't know if anyone is still looking at any kind of legacy products out there or any installed software. If you are, don't bother. To be honest, if you've still got legacy software you can integrate to it, that's absolutely fine. If you're spending the money to buy anything new, invest in cloud. Make the effort and do it, because it actually makes your life a heck of a lot easier if you do it now, and anything that's not cloud is going to become outdated far too quickly. And watch out for hidden costs, so the ones I mentioned before. Talking about implementation and training are often the key costs that you haven't considered. The other one to keep in mind when you're looking at platforms as well are your platform limits. So quite often something will look highly attractive, it will have all the features that you need, but there'll be a set bandwidth in it. As soon as you go above that bandwidth, the costs will start rolling. So do make sure you're asking about that, and again it goes with the scale. Where are you going to be in 3 years' time? How much is it going to cost you then? And then work it into your budget for that. Not saying that any of these say no, but as long as that's a price point that you're aware of and that you're willing to accept, then it's fine. But be aware of it, don't get any nasty surprises. Okay, so that's me for today, and great to talk to you about tech and content.